Okay, and we are back once more. I am joined by Yagamoth, who's going to be doing a 20% 1P2C run of Secret of Mana. We're joined by Crow for commentary. Say hello, everybody.
Hello. And good morning,
Hi.
good evening, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well, and yeah. Hello, Crow.
Yes, so we get to bring multiple controller Secret of Mana to you today. And this game is a blast. It is one of my favorites, and really looking forward to this one.
Indeed. So, in order to pay homage to the original CGDQ run, I'm just gonna choose the same name for the boy, although I will probably just go ahead and choose a very short name for the sprite. And I would say, I guess we can just start at this point. So, everything ready? Oh yeah, by the way, maybe I should mention that specifically. I'm Yagamoth. I'm joined by Crow, who is quite a veteran at this game himself. So, yeah. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. And first of all, this is a classic RPG from the Super Nintendo era. I'm actually playing this on an SNES Mini for one particular reason that I will mention once we get there. Overall, this version is slightly faster, but I think in the Secret of Mana community, we don't really care too much about it because, well, it's just for good fun to speedrun anyways. Alright, I would say let's get this started. Are we ready to count down?
Give me a countdown whenever you're ready.
Alrighty, Crow, you can give us a countdown and we go.
Sure. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Excellent, thank you so much. So, right off the bat, first of all, like in so many other RPGs, you will want to usually choose the shortest possible name for a speedrun in order to, well, waste less frames. One frame in the Super Nintendo era is 1/60th of a second, meaning 60 frames is 1 second. And every time a character in a text box gets displayed, like the character of a name, a letter, that means we lose a little bit more time than usual whenever a name gets called in a text box. And usually just choose one letter names, but well, we just keep it classic, I suppose. So the intro story for Secret of Mana is kind of straightforward, like so many older RPGs. You are in a world where magic exists. You are a little boy that is just on exploration tour, gets sent or well falls down in an unusual spot and finds a sword that ends up being the sword of holiness or whatever it might be. In this case, the mana sword. So yeah, right off the bat at the beginning, you may see at the bottom there is no indicator for stamina bar or health. That will only come up once we pick up the sword. Fun fact, if you try to play around a little bit and try to leave the first area without picking up the sword, the game gets really confused about that. So maybe you can try that sometime. Can recommend it, it's really funky. Either way, we fall down a waterfall, and don't worry, in this world there is no such thing as fall damage, so we also get to travel in rather unusual ways, which is also a lot of fun in a certain sense. We see those bushes we cannot go through, so the boy thinks he has to pick up a way in order to, well, get through those bushes. And convenient enough, there's a rusty sword right over here. The rusty sword apparently is possessed by a ghost, and we're not entirely sure what to do with that. And as a heads up, I will not be exactly keeping track of the story of the game, because we are going to skip quite a bit of it. The original classic Games Done Quick run, I think, was just about a bit more than 5 hours. Nowadays, with a one-player, two-controller run, we can do about 3 runs in that time span. Not quite. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. Also, as another heads up, generally speaking, in the Secret of Mana community, we feel like that using 2 controllers is easier than just using 1 controller for this specific game, just because of how it plays. And Crow is one of the few people who actually runs 1 controller, so Crow, why do we go ahead and kill so many rabbits here?
Sure. All right. So Yakamoth is going to start a little bit of a grind here as he makes his way back to the first village. All of these Rabites have 20 HP, His high damage swings are going to do 18 damage. Randomly, he might get a little less. And unfortunately, he actually swung a little bit too early on the follow-up swing on one of those ray bites there, because whenever you swing before your character's done flashing and has reached 100% stamina again, there are a lot of penalties that get applied to the way the damage rolls work. And if you are at all early, even though it may say like 50% on the stamina gauge, you're going to do 1 damage out of the usual 18 or so. The reason we bothered killing those ray bites at all was not to get experience, not to get gold, but instead to get weapon experience. In Secret of Mana, not only do you level up your characters, you also individually level up each character's skill at a weapon and skill with each of the types of magic. There's 8 different types of weapons, 8 different elements of magic, not all of which we're going to see in this particular run, but in order to make the big glitch that makes all of the boss fights much easier down the line, we will need to get up to level 2 experience on the sword, level 1 experience on the spear. Any weapon is okay for the second one there, but we will be using the spear because it's a little bit faster, a little bit easier to get to. And now we're about to have our tutorial fight against the Mantis Ant.
Indeed. So Mantis Ant is a rather straightforward boss. However, don't mistake that for it being easy. So the game has a safety feature in place where if you die to this guy, you will, instead of gaining over, you will just get revived, which is quite nice because this guy is not particularly easy to take out. Also, the quickest way of taking him out, we figured out, is just standing right in front of him and swinging as soon as my stamina bar at the bottom reaches 100%. Generally speaking, you do not want to swing before the stamina bar reaches 100% because, as Crow mentioned, you just deal so much less damage, and unfortunately the timing is also relatively tight, so I missed the swing twice there. Secret of Mana is one of my favorite games, or actually my favorite game. One of the big reasons is there's so many bosses in this game, and at some point you effectively run from boss to boss to boss without ever healing in between or fighting anything, and it is actually quite intriguing. So, story-wise, we just returned home. The people noticed that we picked up the sword that was actually protecting the village, and now monsters are roaming everywhere free. This guy on the left tells us that we should visit the Water Palace because this is the Sword of Mana, and, well, it's probably a bit rusty and we need to power it up in order to defeat the evil, or something like that. Either way, conveniently enough, in quotation marks, we also get thrown out of our beginning village, Poto's village, and so we are no longer allowed to return from here.
The Elder attempts to give us 50 gold in a chest in the basement. However, we have an alternate method of acquiring cash, so we're not even going to bother with that. We'll just storm out of the village.
Indeed. We have other means of acquiring money that are a lot more efficient than that. However, it is worth mentioning that if you do not like glitches, well, this might not be the run for you. There is a glitchless category of this game, and I think it's just under 4 hours normally when they are running this. So I need a little bit more weapon experience here in order to level up the sword to level 1, and I hopefully will get it right here. Nice. I also got a lucky critical hit there. Whenever you see some text box mentioning that this enemy got whacked, that means it's a critical hit. Critical hits still double the damage, and also can go beyond the usual limits of like enemy defense in a certain sense. It's not exactly relevant until a fair bit later for that matter. Either way, we have leveled up the sword to level 1, which means we are now able to charge it up. So leveling up a sword does not inherently improve your damage with it, it just allows you to charge up your weapon. By holding down the attack button, which is the B button here, the yellow one, it allows us to charge it up after our stamina bar reaches 100%. With that, we can execute special moves. A level 1 charge attack with the sword is a forward lunge and a swing from above, which does 50% more damage. Each charge attack level has its own special unique animation, and certain animations are more useful for certain bosses than others, in short. And what that means, you will see that eventually, I would suppose. Further, here in the Water Palace we have just arrived, we are told that this is indeed the legendary Sword of Mana, however it is rather weak. And in order to power this up, we are supposed to, well, fuse the sword with a mana seed and just collect all the 8 mana seeds around the world. At least that's the idea. So the mana seed is not just a plot element, but actually it does improve your characters a little bit by just getting them. So we deal a little bit more damage, we have a bit more defense, a bit more magic attack power, or healing power for that matter, as well as this would allow us to level up our spells to level 1. Once we pick up a second mana seed, we can level them up to level 2, etc. The sword at this point is maxed out at level 1. Before we can level it up any further towards level 2, we actually have to level it up, or we have to forge it with a blacksmith. Also here we do a little trick where we save, and then we do a quick reset by holding start select L and R for a short moment here. We can just reset the game. And this allows us to skip about 2 text boxes, as well as not having to walk all the way outside. Plus, safety saves. We will want to do those in a marathon run.
Yeah, the reason that works there is that whenever you save the game here, this game does not remember where you were whenever you made the save. It records instead where you were when you entered the room in which you made that save. We are actually going to make some significant abuse of that fact a little bit later on in the run. But for now that we've just acquired the spear, that was among our care package we got from Luca just now, we are now going to take the opportunity to level it up. Looks like that grind went not quite optimally with that Lullabud there, but...
Yep, they weren't quite as nice. But then again, a lot of the things in Secret of Mana, if you don't get the optimal patterns and such, you can mitigate it by just playing well. Well, that, I dare to say that wasn't my end. That didn't quite go as well. But now I have only 21 out of 59 HP, and it should probably be fine, but I might as well take a quick save before we go on. So now we're gonna do the first real glitch, I would say, and that is going to involve a bunch of money and selling nothing. So would you like to explain how that works?
Absolutely. So we are about to talk to Nico, who is the merchant who is quite stingy. Normally, he's just really annoying because he charges double for everything. However, we are going to swindle the swindler by purchasing 2 different items, going back into the menu, highlighting the second of those items, selling both of them, going back into the buying menu for a moment, and going back to the selling menu, and suddenly we have a whole bunch of icons we shouldn't. What has happened is that the game is only allowed to backtrack your current cursor position by 1 at a time, but whenever you exit the selling menu, it does not save any changes to that. So by starting us on item slot 2 and bringing us to a total number of items of 0, but then priming the game's data with the ring as shown by the buying menu, we have entered the selling menu with nothing in our inventory. And then we rotate the ring so that it points to what would be the last spot in our inventory data, and we sell that. It turns out that selling nothing in this game is worth somewhere around 30,000 GP. And it will also turn into a blat item. You never want to use this, which is why we have crammed it at the back spot of our inventory. It doesn't even get an icon, so it'll never be drawn and it won't be selectable. There's no risk of us accidentally using it. If we somehow did, the game would crash. With that money, we have bought 2 each of a wide variety of consumable items, and we'll get to why exactly we did it that way in a little bit. For now, Yagamoth is going through Gaia's navel. He's killing a bunch of goblins, again, to level up his weapon as he goes through. And conveniently, whenever you level up this game, you do restore your HP. You don't get your MP back, but you do get your HP, and that did save him from a small mistake with the goblins there from actually killing him. Going through any portion of this game with only one character is quite dangerous. Stun blocking is very much so a thing. If an enemy manages to attack you while you're on the ground, you're just going to take more damage, and then they have another opportunity to do the same. And it can get out of control pretty quickly. But we have gotten through that challenge, and now we are making our way to the dwarf village.
Indeed. Along the way, we also picked up a magic rope, which allows us to return back to the entrance of an area. So that is going to be quite handy in order to save a bunch of time. Also, you can actually get stuck if you do not pick up the magic rope and go into a certain area back to at some point. So the remake, actually, they made it so you have to pick up the magic rope before you can progress in certain points. So that's
this version does actually stop you from entering Kilroy's area if you don't pick up the rope.
I did
not
know.
sure if there's any other spots where you can get stuck before then, but I'm sure with enough glitches you can probably get yourself stuck somewhere.
Indeed. So here we buy a power wrist, which actually isn't just more defense, but also increases our strength by 5, which is actually quite a substantial increase in damage overall, and we will want to take good advantage of that. I buy equipment for both the boy and the sprite, and then 5 additional armors that we are not going to equip, instead we're going to throw them away. And the reason for this is also the reason as to why we only bought 2 of each individual item. Hugging the left wall here allows me to equip an item, throw it away, equip an item, throw it away, equip an item, throw it away. And, well, there's a particular reason for that.
Yeah. So what's going on here is that whenever you throw away a piece of equipment that you have equipped already, the game will erroneously try to unequip that item after it's already been deleted. The way it tries to do that winds up searching for a piece of equipment that the boy has equipped at a place in the memory set by the horizontal position on the screen of the trash can. So by lining ourselves up along the left wall and putting the equipment into the trash rather than the other way around, we have seen to it that the starting point of its search to try to find something that it thinks is the boy's equipment is right at the beginning of our consumable items inventory. And it just so happens that the way the game flags that you have 2 of an item in your inventory is the same way that it flags that the boy has that item equipped, if it were a piece of equipment. So we have therefore caused the game to reduce our count of all of those items from 2 to 0. Normally, if you run out of an item, it's not that you have 0 of it now. It is that the item gets deleted. The game does not expect you to have 0, and in practice, having 0 acts as if you had 7. And normally, this game only allows you to have up to 4 of a given item. Once we've done that, once we've gone through the remaining plot thing with watching the show with the sprite, we are now fighting Tropicalo.
Indeed. Tropicalo is basically supposed to be a cycle boss, but by timing our hits just as he unburrows, he somehow interrupts going back down in the underground with his other attack, which is a bit of a weird effect because normally he's supposed to burrow down every time you hit him. But, well, we can just time it consistently so we can get 2 hits in per cycle. So that saves us quite a bit of time overall, since, well, he does have also quite a bit of HP. But yeah.
There's a couple other weird things about the fight, too.
Yeah.
There are supposed to be 2 of those vine-sprouting brambler enemies, but one of them gets its position set based on the data that happened to be associated with the buttons you were pressing with your controller as the fight started. So as long as you're pressing any button, it'll usually be off screen.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Also, there's a couple ways to dodge the pumpkin bombs. You can run away from the explosion after you've triggered it, or you can just hide in the corner as Yagamoth did there, since he was spawning in the sides, and the bomb will trigger on the high ground.
Indeed. So, we finally get our second party member. This is kind of where Secret of Mana is a bit different than your usual RPG, because Secret of Mana allows you to play co-op directly with up to 3 players. For Super Nintendo, that is very, very unusual, and I imagine a lot of people have their fondest memories when they played this game when they were young and had their siblings or their friends just play along on a rather epic adventure, honestly. That's at least how it works for me, because having multiple people play at the same time just co-op through a rather huge story like this was amazing to me anyways. So yeah, and here is also where I would like to point out that in some other games, playing one player to control is just kind of like a gimmick category or just a side thing. In Secret of Mana, it's actually a little bit more than that. Let me real quick equip the sprite with his equipment, or their equipment, since that's the new thing how it is worded in the remake. And then I also set my control scheme to be upside down. So I'm actually using a second controller, but not all the time. So whenever you see that little one in the top right of the avatar at the bottom, you see that the cactus, which one I have selected. Right now I have the boy selected, so the one is in the top right of the boy's portrait. And as soon as I select the sprite, the one will be in the sprite, etc. Whenever I press the select button, I switch character. In order to select the second controller, I have to press the start button on the second controller, which I will do here in just a moment. So I hit this plant start button on the second controller and start controlling the sprite with the second controller. This has various benefits over, well, just one controller. For example, whenever you go through a sprint sensation, or also if you talk to a cannon travel guy in order to just fly somewhere, which, by the way, welcome to Secret of Mana, it's the best way of traveling. You can actually move slightly earlier again after the other character, or the other controller for that matter, has initiated certain events. So here, the boy can actually start moving significantly earlier than the sprite, just because he was not the one to talk to the cannon travel guy, and I can move a bit further over here. Further, we are actually going to take the back entrance through the Haunted Forest. So at this point, you're kind of supposed to go through the Haunted Forest and meet a lady like your third party member along the way. However, we are just going to walk through the wall here in 2 different fashions. AI control characters can just straight up walk through walls for whatever reason, but for me to get through the wall as the control character, I had to charge up the sword to level 1, and then hit the rope pull with the second controller. It's actually kind of weird how that works. But we basically went through a path that you're supposed to have a special weapon, the whip for, in order to be able to cross through there. However, with some shenanigans, we can just skip doing that entirely, which also means we skip getting the lady into our party, which has some other implications such as a rather strange name, which we will see soon. In the meantime, I'm actually trying to level up the sword towards level 2. I need a total of 12.5 kills. So Crow, why is it half a kill?
So whenever you gain experience with a weapon, a couple different things happen. One, you're getting an amount of experience based on your current experience level. So as you're making your way towards level 1 with a weapon, you're getting 9 experience points each time. So as you're going from level 1 to level 2, which is what he's doing right now, he needs to get 8 experience points each time. However, there's also an aspect of weapon experience sharing. Whatever amount of experience one character gains on their weapon, half of that amount is awarded to your allies. This also has the interesting effect where if you're trying to level up a very high level weapon, it may be better to simply have an ally level up a low-level weapon, one that they don't have experience with, and just share the 4 experience points each time, rather than trying to gain 1 experience point as you make your way up through the final few stages. Also, there's a penalty if you are significantly over-leveled compared to the enemies you're killing. That is unlikely in a speedrun, however.
Yeah, except for that one place where I just killed a flower. In the flower I killed earlier, it doesn't matter whether the boy kills it or the sprite. The boy is just 1 level too high for getting full weapon experience for the sprite, from the flower. But, did I level up the sword? I hope I did.
If not, this is going to be exciting.
Yeah. I have backup strategies, but that would be really slow. Oh well, let's actually get to the boss real quick here. You will see the technique that we use for pretty much more or less the rest of the game, you could say, in order to defeat bosses rather quickly. This is the main reason why 2 control is not just a gimmick, but a very controllable, let's try this again, a very controllable, wrath of nature, or whatever you want to call it. So let's see how this is going to go.
So what you're going to see here is some weapon trading in order to confuse the game as to what charge level we have achieved. We get the sword charged up to level 2, swap with the spear. The spear, however, he only has 1 level of experience with. So if you were watching closely there, you may have seen some very strange things showing up on the stamina bar as it was trying to show the charge level that he had achieved. Because whenever he switched from the sword to the spear, he had charge level 2 out of a maximum of only 1. The reason he needs the second controller to do this is that while you're charging up your weapon, you're not allowed to pause and therefore not allowed to change weapons. A second character, however, can. Another thing that can happen is Spiky Tiger can just go up on the high ground and refuse to take any damage at all. You can hit him with the bow and arrows, but unfortunately an overcharged bow and arrow attack does not go any distance and so would not reach him, so we just have to wait for him to come down. Once he does come down, we hit him for maybe 2,000-ish damage, but there's a cap of 999 damage in this game. Minus whatever their defense is, possibly less than that if you get a low damage roll. But in any case, we get to one-shot bosses throughout the early game, and that's the long and short of it.
Indeed. So yeah, basically there's 2 ways of getting an overcharge glitch going. One is by weapon switching a level 1 weapon onto a level 2 charge attack. The other one is by telling an AI control character to only charge up to level 1 after it already charged up to level 2. That's the method of how a 1 controller run gets overcharged attacks. However, if you have to rely on AI control characters, if you have ever played this game, that is not the most easy thing to do, which is why pretty much the main category in Secret of Mana is playing with 2 controllers. There is glitchless categories where you can also play with, well, no glitches, and those runs are even more brutal because you cannot properly buy all the equipment, defense, or consumables that you kind of really want along the way. So in a glitchless run, you will often just run around with effectively no equipment, and if you just make a very slight mistake or the enemies don't behave, you can get very easily crushed, because this game is not easy to run through, let's put it this way. Which is also why, quick shout out to the original classic instant quick run, they did not know about the money glitch. The only 2 glitches they knew about were the ones where they did an overcharge by a weapon swap, and the other one is leveling up their characters really quickly by killing their own allies, which is not until way later into the game. So they effectively ran through the entire game with more or less no defense or equipment. The glitchless run has been refined quite a bit over the years now as well, so that one is faster than the original instant quick run as well. But I kind of start to wonder sometimes whether they even know what they got into. The original runner, who basically carried the entire run, which I believe was called Molotov, if I'm not mistaken, he did actually a lot of work for that from what I've seen. Like, sure, nowadays we may have other strategies, more things that we do and don't do, etc. But it is actually quite intriguing to watch. So here we are. Oh, by the way, we can use magic ropes, which brings us back to the entrance, while we are still moving around with the sprite or the lady, which means we can actually activate the magic rope and then afterwards run into a cutscene trigger, meaning the cutscene plays at the entrance of the cave. Which is kind of weird because the sprite just goes into the wall.
The girl would also be going into the wall if we could actually see her. However, instead, her name is being listed with a whole bunch of instances of go. So
Yes.
it
That's
just so happens that the default data that is in place where you're supposed to put the girl's name, the data that's there gets interpreted by the parser as the pair of letters G and O. And then there's 12 instances of that before it hits something that it thinks is the end of the name. So that's why you get such a ludicrously long name that has to be written out. And that long name does take some extra time to write out in all the cutscenes, but picking up the girl is still very slow for a lot of reasons. Not only does picking her up take a bunch of time, you have to go into the forest, fight some werewolves, come out. But furthermore, just having an extra party member following you around doubles the length of your train of AI characters. Right now, Yagamoth is able to get around a lot of enemies that would normally distract, a lot of little cul-de-sacs that the AI would normally get stuck in. And it doesn't take that much effort to convince one AI that's following him around to get around an obstacle. But as soon as you get a second AI there, things get a lot hairier.
Indeed. Worth noting, something we haven't quite mentioned yet, your characters cannot be too far apart from each other. Once they basically reach the camera limit, or the camera border, if you will, effectively you get stopped in your tracks and you cannot actually move too far away from your allies. Meaning that because of how AI pathing works in this game, it's very, very, very easy for them to get stuck one way or another. As I could see, the sprite just got easily stuck up there, it couldn't have gone on, but thankfully there was a screen transition, so I didn't have to worry about it. But in a lot of cases, we have to very much worry about AI control characters just being, well, in wrong places or weird places at all times. And so we have to try and manipulate spawns and also enemy behavior, and also just make sure that we don't go the wrong way around the corner, let's put it that way. Like, just holding down left against the wall instead of just straight down can make your AI control characters go way above and into just the weirdest corner and get stuck everywhere. It's quite fascinating, actually. But it's part of the speedrunner's task, I would say, to learn how the AI works to a large extent. But there's pretty much always these little nooks and crannies that they get stuck in, and you didn't even know about that one before. Oh, I'm gonna get it here. Another little thing we haven't quite mentioned yet is that there's only so many enemies that can be on the screen at any given point. There's only 3 total maximum. So in order to spawn manipulate certain things, we can make basically the game think, because the game basically tries to predict where you're going to, and we can make it basically spawn enemies that are not gonna be in our way, and effectively despawn enemies that would be. And we do this more or less all over the place. I can explain that a bit further. For now, the Fire Gigas, we have a very, very tight timing on how we can defeat this guy. And the way we do this is just weapon swap twice, hit with the sprite right here, and then we have a very narrow window to hit him, and if we don't get a lucky damage roll, we actually don't deal enough damage against the Fire Gigas. Which means he would actually get his spell off, and that is actually a minor disaster. To an extent anyways, unless I react to it. The disaster is that the Fire Gigas, for example, just targets his spells onto all party members. So here's the problem. We are, for 1, under-leveled rather severely, and for 2, we only have 2 party members, which means our party members that are still around effectively take significantly more damage from the Fire Gigas. So that means in this case specifically, the sprite would always die unless I, well, do something about it by casting a spell itself with the sprite. Because while you cast a spell, you're invulnerable, at least as a player character, and the enemy spell is not gonna hurt you. However, the boy just barely survives one spell cast from the Fire Gigas, so there's that. Also, to the mana seed! And we just leave. Because why would we seal the mana seed the game doesn't even check for? So, to remind you, we are supposed to seal all the mana seeds with our sword in order to power up the sword, and it does have in-game benefits. You gain slightly more power. In fact, normally you could now level up the spells up to level 2 if you seal the mana seed of Earth. However, we just ignore that, because the game never checks for whether we even have to seal the mana seeds at all. So we just, well, go away. That's kind of all there is to it.
Yeah, if you seal that particular mana seed, there's a very long scene that follows where the sprite regains a portion of his memory. But as far as game progression goes, the only check that the game makes is upon you having collected Gnome's magic. So now we have 2 elements to work with, which we will need later on anyway in order to deal with some crystal orbs to unlock some portions of dungeons.
Yes, interestingly enough, we could in theory actually skip that entire portion, including Gnome, if we had a way to get, well, past certain crystal switches that we need to activate with the magic. But, well, we don't unless we were to use arbitrary script execution. So this run has basically all the glitches allowed except for one. There is actually a category which allows arbitrary script execution, and you can kind of imagine that like the Pokemon Red or Blue runs, where you do really funky stuff and suddenly you're at the credits. And that's kind of part of the speedrun categories now as well, thanks to BJW, who did a casual playthrough of this and suddenly was walking through the wall to an inn that didn't exist in the Fire Palace. It was very, very weird, and also quite fascinating. So in theory, the shortest category of Seeker of Mana is actually around, what was it, 7 minutes or so?
I think it's shorter than that.
Is it?
Yeah, pretty much you just beat Mantis Ant, go shopping, talk to the Canon Travel guy, and you're done.
Yes, it's kind of fascinating. So, alrighty, we are in the ruins here, and I use very particular movement to spawn manipulate certain enemies to appear or not appear. For example, in this room, I lock up left against the wall. In this case, if I wouldn't walk up left, there would be one of the tomato guys on top of the stairs. These guys are tomato guys, by the way. And he would just kind of be a nuisance to get by, especially with an AI-controlled character. And we just abuse the fact that the game tries to predict where you're going and tries to spawn enemies along your way, but we just walk diagonally into a wall, and the game isn't quite sure where to put them, or which enemies to spawn anyways. So yeah, you will probably see this throughout the run pretty much everywhere, but unless it's particularly important for me to like manipulate certain spawns, we will probably just go, that's part of the speedrun, that's just normal. Alrighty, and we have here the first boss who has evasion. Ironically, it is a wall. So one of the probably biggest flaws Seeker of Mana has is it doesn't communicate to you that you're actually missing certain attacks because enemies have evasion. So this is a wall, and because it has evasion, and let's put it this way, enemies either have evasion or they don't, just to keep it simple. About 40% of the time, I will miss my attack here. So this here could one-shot the wall. 40% of the time, I just straight up miss, like this. And the other 40% of the time, or the 20% of the time I hit, approximately, that's just rough numbers, I would actually get a low damage roll, which is also not all that pleasant. There we go, finally. So third try is the charm. Then also, worth noting that sometimes enemies cast spells as well, and I need to work my way around that, since while they're casting a spell, you cannot hit them with physical weapons either. So it's kind of a weird dynamic where I'm just trying to guess when I can hit the enemy, and when they are effectively invulnerable or I cannot hit them. And
Another important aspect to enemies casting spells is that whenever one of your characters is getting hit by magic, that character cannot bring up a menu. If you recall, this whole weapon overcharge glitch that we're using completely hinges upon using the menu in order to execute it. So we have to kind of time out what we're going to do in that scenario. It gets a little bit easier once we pick up the girl as well, because we'll be able to swap away from the character that's getting hit, or perhaps whichever character is not being used for the overcharge at the current moment. Maybe that character will just be thrown closer to the boss. Most bosses in this game will target whoever is closest to them.
Indeed. And just kind of adding to that, another mechanic we haven't quite explained yet is whenever the game decides to hit a character, the damage is already calculated how much they would take. However, you can effectively deny whatever damage they would take. It's most obvious when a character gets hit with spells. We can then feed that character who is about to, well, take damage from a spell just an item, and they will not take any damage. So for now, this is not that important because we're not going to get one-shot by most enemies and spells. However, later on in the game, that is going to be increasingly more and more important because we are going to get one-shot by bosses and such. So for now, basically keep in mind if the enemy just deals any damage and the character is just on the floor and is about to receive that damage in numbers, we can just give that character an item. Any item works, it doesn't have to be a healing item, and we just deny that damage, which can be quite convenient. Alrighty, don't forget to save after the next boss. So, also, a thing I'm trying to do on certain bosses is, you know how the screen just fades to white after you defeat the boss, and then you gather, you get healed, and everything is nice, and you get the weapon orb that you so deserve. Well, in some cases, there's actually certain switches or triggers on the ground that we can hit, and if we manage to hit them just at the right time, we can actually skip that whiteout animation, saving like 3 or 4 seconds. But you have to step on them just at the right time. Also, by the way, story-wise, the Mana Seed of Water got stolen and we are trying to bring it back. We are not entirely sure how we know about this unless we, well, actually follow the story, which we kind of skipped a bunch here, which is not mandatory for that matter. So, oh, another thing, Crow, what we probably should mention is menu buffering and retaining spells.
Yeah.
Or definitely.
Yeah, we call it charge retention, and after we've set up our weapon overcharge glitch, which again, we confuse the game by getting our current weapon charge level higher than our supposed maximum by swapping whether we have the sword, which we can go up to level 2 with, or the spear, which we can go up to level 1. Once we have that overcharge in place, each time we unleash the attack, we will pause the game and then let go of the attack button, which is normally how you release the attack with the person who didn't pause. And then while the game is transitioning from being paused to running again, you press the charge button once more. And this will cause the game to unleash the attack, but not go through the process of undoing your current charge level. So with that, you won't have to set up the overcharge all over again, which saves a whole lot of time, especially once you get bosses that have over 1,000 HP and you have to hit them more than once anyway, or bosses that evade, and so for all you know, if you get unlucky, you might have to attack them 5 times, 6 times before they take any damage at all.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why Secret of Mana with 2 controllers is actually a very, very smooth run. We can reliably just retain charges. If you wanted to do that with only one controller, you would have to have very, very specific timing in order to switch to that character and immediately press the attack button, because you can only have the AI control characters start the overcharge, and then you can only do that once as well. So 2 controllers just makes this so much nicer and easier overall. Also here, I forgot to save in the Dwarven village, so I'm just gonna run over here. Because the next boss is the Jabberwocky. Jabberwocky has a ridiculous amount of magic power, to say the least. To give you a frame of reference, he has, I think, 950 HP, or was it 900? Either way, he only has, well, just under 1000 HP, which is manageable. However, if he were to heal himself, he heals himself for more than half of his HP, which is very unusual for that to happen, but it is definitely a thing that can happen. Further, because he also has an offensive spell in Acid Storm, and we only have 2 characters, we are guaranteed to be a one-shot. Unfortunately, Jabberwocky has absolutely no indication as to when he's about to cast the spell, so I couldn't even prepare for that if I tried. So while I will be able to most of the time just one-shot him without any trouble whatsoever, sometimes he decides to Acid Storm, and that is why I went over there to save. So yeah, once again, overcharging, I charge up to level 1, switch up to the other weapon, immediately it is level 2, switch back to the level 1 weapon, and then we are starting to overcharge. Then I check my bottom screen on how far I'm approximately in the charge level, and then I can basically open up the menu on the second controller, release a charge attack, and retain it in order to just regain the same charge attack I just released. For anybody who may not know this game, the normal limit of a charge attack is a level 8 charge attack, which does 400% damage, and that's a load of damage you can do at that point in the game. And we are charging up to level 30, 40, 50, depending on the situation. It is a pretty ridiculous boost that we get. And we basically just memorize certain, like, scramble things at the bottom in the note where the number is supposed to appear, in order to know which type of charge attack we are going to get. Level 1 charge attack.
Each of those charge levels has one specific animation. As you go through those overcharged portions, you're quickly transitioning between completely different styles of attacks. Sometimes you'll spin and then lunge. Sometimes you'll do a cyclone that goes all the way around the stage and it takes forever. A large part of refining and getting a clean run in this game is getting used to when you need to pause in order to get a particular one of those attacks to come out, and then knowing which one you even want to have as far as attacking quickly. Sometimes you want the safety of a large attack. Sometimes you just want the opponent, just want your character to swat very briefly at the opponent because it's a quick animation. It all just depends what you're going for.
Indeed. Safety of a large attack means there is various attacks like the gigantic spin in a circle that gives you a lot of invulnerability frames against like physical attacks from enemies and bosses. And we definitely will want to use those and have used those already in various instances. Also, Muggles! So here I talked with, or the sprite basically had the conversation about whatever it was, and then I switched over to the boy with the first controller in order to be able to already talk to a Moogle pretty much right away. And that also saves a bunch of time. Also, you're not supposed to get hit. Also here we're going to fight against 5 little hedgehogs, or pepplers they are called in the game.
3.
Look a bit like Sonic. Did I say 5? I meant 3.
Yes, you have King Arthur's syndrome from Monty Python the Rail.
Alright, so yeah, either way, there's 5 of these guys, and that's a bit of a problem because they are a lot like, let's see what I get it. Okay, this is looking decent. This is the big whirlwind, for example. So, these guys have evasion, which means 40% of the time, even though you can clearly see my swing does connect with them, they will just dodge my attack. And I would say it's about average to kill all 3 of them with 3 attacks. Sometimes if you get ridiculously lucky, you can kill all 3 of them with just 1 attack, but most of the time you need a bunch more than that. But yeah, we just talked to another little Moogle there, and the Moogle tells us that, hey, thank you for freeing our village, and the sprite somehow hits his head on something, I have no idea. Speaking of hitting the head, you're not supposed to get hit here, please. Also, The boy
Oh,
getting...
yeah.
Would you like to
So
explain those?
Yagamoth there had to use a medical herb to cure that silence. Silence in this game inflicts the confusion status because that makes sense. And it reverses your controls in addition to making you unable to cast spells. Reversing your controls is a pretty hilarious status effect. I like it. However, it has the additional effect when you're fighting owls, where if an owl is targeting someone who is under the effects of confusion, that owl will attack like 6 times a second or so, where normally they attack maybe once every 6 seconds. It's really quite extreme what the difference is. So speaking of birds who are jerks, here's Springbeak. This guy is very hard to figure out how to hit with physical weapons. The big culprit here is that his beak on the front is actually a shield. So if any portion of your attack is considered as having connected with his beak, then even though the rest of your attack hit his body, it doesn't count at all. In the original CGDQ run from 10 years ago, they, at my suggestion, weirdly enough, chose to use a projectile weapon. So they got the weapon overcharge going, and then they swapped in, instead of using the spear, they switched to a javelin attack. And since the javelin, when overcharged, goes nowhere, there was no risk of it accidentally hitting the beak. We didn't actually know at the time, I don't think, that that was the reason why. But since that time, we have had support from people poking at the game with various tools, including a hitbox viewer written in Lua you can use to try to figure out how exactly attacking all of these bosses works.
Yes, shout out to HHS from the TAS Videos forum for creating and providing that. It's actually a very crazy complete tool for a lot of things. And speaking of shoutouts, I actually have no idea who figured out the original charge retention. When I came basically into the scene, Luigi Meister, who was running this game on Play 2 control before me, already was using it. It might be him who discovered it, or it might be like, I heard of Kovastis and Shaden actually running Secret of Mana at some point. They might have discovered it. Unfortunately, I do not know, although I do like to give credit. And let me put it this way. Over the years, Secret of Mana has kind of developed as a speedrun, and how's about it, bro? We started running glitchless, and we start finding glitches for, well, the other stuff.
I call this game the glitch that keeps on glitching. You tend to find more new and unusual glitches in this game whenever you're not trying to play with glitches. Part of that, of course, is because whenever we're doing one of these speedruns here, we have a pretty tight script. We're always kind of doing the same thing the same way. As soon as you add experimentation in this, that, or the other way, suddenly the floodgates open for weird stuff to happen. Like, one big example of that, we found a way to convert one weapon into looking like another weapon just by accident, and it turns out it's as simple as just changing your weapon while healing numbers or damage numbers are on top of the character. But yeah.
Really weird. Also, we can, by the way, air control characters can walk through NPCs as long as they are not in combat, as in there's no weapons drawn. And in this case, we just stepped straight through Mushroom Guard that is supposed to block us before we talk to the king. But well, we just ignore him.
Yeah. If you want to do that yourself, it's pretty simple. You just walk at the guard and then mash the select button. Every time you swap controls between different characters, the character you just swapped to gets one frame where they move as if they were still an AI character. So that will inch you through one step at a time. The catch, however, is that you cannot scroll the screen with an AI-controlled character. So that prevents us from using that same skip in order to, say, get past the guards at the Pandora ruins. If we could do that, that would actually be a pretty interesting way to possibly skip Spiky Tiger altogether. But
Yeah.
alas, we cannot do that.
Yeah, we can actually get inside, but we cannot get outside anymore.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, but that's true. It's definitely a thing. Also, I'm going to actually switch the weapon with the boy so we get a better one. And I'm also going to use a medical urban sprite just so my controls are not reversed. Because having a reverse controller that is reversed is really confusing.
The reverse controls even apply when you're in melee.
Yes.
It's really weird.
So, this is an interesting landmark boss because this Great Viper here is the first boss who has more than 1000 HP, which means we have to hit him twice pretty much no matter what, and there's not really exactly a way around that. Also, he decided to go away. Hey, could you come back, please?
The reason Yagamoth decided to attack at all there was he was trying to avoid going too far into overcharge. If you get to overcharge level 128, the damage of the overcharge resets, and whereas we have a pretty solid feel for what attacks are going to look like based off of the little glitchy pieces of bars that show up at the bottom whenever we're around charge level 30 or 50 or whatever. We don't really have that for charge level 140 or anything like that. So we really don't want to go into that regime if we don't have to.
Indeed. So here, story-wise, we have managed to find Flammy, who is a magical dragon-type magic beast, who is very young and probably its parents were eaten by the Great Viper, at least that's what the game tells us. And we bring it back to the King Truffle, which we've never met, and he's going to take care of it. A bit of a weirdness here in that text box. There's supposed to be an option where you can tell the King Truffle that you really like the name, or you don't like the name. But for some reason, the script doesn't work quite right, and it just proceeds as if you always pick you don't like the name. Kind of weird.
I actually thought it was a joke all along. I never really poked at it to see if there was something in there.
It's supposed to be an option. Thanks to the remake, we know it's supposed to be an option. Alrighty, so now we actually have the choice of either going to the ice country first or to the desert first. Now, weirdly enough, we go to the desert first because if you have played this game casually, you know you have to go into the ice country, get Salamando, the fire magic spirit, and also retrieve the mana seed of fire from the ice palace, and then go and complete the desert. So there's actually a bit of a catch to this. If you go to the ice country first, you cannot directly fly over to the desert because this event here, where we're going to get lost in the desert, cannot take place from the cannons in the ice country, which means as a result, we would have to go via Matango, and then we would be able to fly over to the desert. However, if you go to the desert first and then shoot over to the ice country, and then we can go directly back, which actually saves a few seconds. It's not even that much faster, but it's just a weird thing that I had to wrap my head around. Because I never even knew that the ice country cannon travel guide tells you, oh, we don't have enough gunpowder to shoot you over to the desert, which I'm pretty sure that it's actually the exact same distance to the desert as it is to Matango. At least it seems like it.
Part of what makes going to Matango awful is that you have to go through that cave that you have to use the axe for again. They don't just plop you right next to where the cannon is located. In any case, we've now found ourselves on the sand ship. Getting here is just a matter of traveling around in a circle. It's kind of a Lost Woods sort of scenario with the desert. Depending on which directions you go, it might take you a while to get there. It might take a very short period. But now that we're on the sand ship, we need to reassemble our party. Amusingly, at this point, the game is going to, quote-unquote, return the girl to our party. we never collected the girl in the first place, so now we are finally going to have 3 party members to work with. This also means that the girl has not gained any experience at all. She is atrociously low on HP, and we will very much so want to make sure that she stays alive for the first couple of boss fights here, so that she can catch up on levels and not just die to everything all the time.
Yeah. Funnily enough, she also does not bring the claw with her. Normally the claw actually gets put in your inventory when you name the lady. Also, actually, one thing I just remembered, they did also use another glitch in the original classic Instant Quick Run where they named another character the same name as the first one and just initiated that character multiple times to get a bunch of armors to sell, which is a rather obscure one because, well, we don't usually get to use that one because we now have the money glitch, but I just remembered that they did that too, so that's quite interesting. So, yeah, we have the lady in our party now. She actually has already the claw pre-equipped, but as soon as we equip something else on her, we will no longer be able to use that claw, which I'm going to more or less immediately give her the whip, because that's just a really useful weapon that she can use in a lot of cases. So, just going to do the same thing here, briefly equip the lady with the thing. Also, in order to open up the menu of your partner, you can press the X button. So, you can only open up the menu of your partner that is not controlled by a controlled character. Which means, in this case, I will want to, well, specifically use the X button to swap the weapons around for the sprite, the boy, and backwards, while I'm controlling the lady, for example. So, it's actually a lot of weird kind of management, because sometimes you position one of your secondary controlled characters in front of the boss in order for them to absorb certain spells and attacks. Then you have to briefly switch to the other character in order to still be able to menu, since you can't menu while you're on the ground, and it gets messy really quick, but the more you play it, the more useful it gets. Also, we finally get an armor upgrade. We haven't quite had one in a while, and this is also going to be the only armor upgrade we're going to get, interestingly enough. So we buy silver band for the lady, golden vest for both for all 3 characters, as well as a raccoon cap for everybody as well. Actually going to buy like 2 or 3 more raccoon caps just in case I need to equipment trash along the way, but we'll see.
So, whenever you take damage in this game, if you get hit for more than a certain percentage of your HP, you'll get knocked to the ground, whereas otherwise you'll just kind of get pushed backward a little bit. Getting knocked to the ground takes a lot longer to recover from, so that alone will very quickly make up for the time that we're spending putting this equipment on. There was a little bit of experimentation with skipping that armor upgrade right there, but we did not stick with it for very long. The dogs in the upcoming section are just so mean if you give them a chance to do their thing.
Yeah, the wolves here are really, really vicious, which is also why we use frost weapons. Funnily enough, frost weapons actually do not deal frost elemental damage. They literally just do neutral damage, but they have that additional effect of having a high chance of freezing an enemy and turning them into happy little snowmen. And that's exactly why we use this effect here, where we gave our characters frosty weapons to, well, freeze them. Frozen enemies are completely inexistent effectively for AI control characters, so they just ignore them, which is very, very handy, because otherwise a lot of them would be a huge problem, as you might be able to imagine. Especially these wolves who don't just attack really decently strong, like with relatively high power, but also because they just attack so quickly and have so much movement speed. It is actually relatively difficult to deal with these guys overall. So, next up we have another fruit salad boss coming up. This is the Boreal Face. And it's kind of like the first one. As soon as I hit him once, he will dive back down. There's actually recently a more in-depth strategy where we use the slowdown spell in order to pin him in place, in order to well, just hit him twice in the first cycle, but it's relatively tight timing and I haven't quite practiced it yet. Another minor thing I'm doing is whenever I defeat a boss, I go ahead and try to gather my party in one spot, since they will also gather after the entire cutscene, and just having them already pre-gathered, kind of like in the Mega Man game, saves you a little bit of time. So, and we are coming up to weird cutscene out of sequence or just skipping a step of a cutscene thing. So,
Yeah, this one's pretty fun. So we're going to make the use of two controllers. We talk to a random NPC in order to get the other controller to sneak past the person who's supposed to tell us to watch the stove. So because of that, the overall progression of this cutscene is behind by one number in its game state. So characters are going to appear at the moment they're supposed to disappear is how that winds up coming out. So here's Salamando whenever he was supposed to disappear. And now we're talking to apparently no one. This is actually the Scorpion army we're talking with. It's the people that had built Kilroy earlier. This is another one of their get-rich-quick schemes. And whenever they're supposed to leave, they suddenly appear. And now we're just turning tail and running. We picked up Salamando, and now we're heading out. This may seem a little strange because you may remember going and saving Christmas by rescuing Santa from his monstrous form. We're not going to do that. We are intentionally not going to clear the Ice Palace so we can make use of it later. Also, we're going to go through the Fire Palace in a rather unusual way in order to make all of this work out. The reason we're supposed to deal with the Frost Gigas, Santa Claus, all of that stuff, is because Santa stole the Fire Palace mana seed and was trying to use it to grow a Christmas tree. As far as the game's code is concerned, however, they cause the seed to become stolen once you reach a particular room in the basement of the Fire Palace. We are going to use what is supposed to be an exit-only ramp in order to circumvent that particular room and just sneak on through the first portion of the Fire Palace and not trigger that theft at all. So, in order to do that, we're going to make use of barrels. Barrels are a kind of strange item in the game. Their intended use is to protect you from physical damage. However, a character who is stuck in a barrel and gets healing numbers placed upon them, there's no animation that's properly associated with healing when you're in a barrel. Normally, when you're healing, when you're not in a barrel, your hand goes in the air and you're like, yeah! HP. But instead, you just get locked into whatever velocity you had at the exact moment that you got placed into a barrel. So, he got all three characters in barrels, he caused healing to occur, and then he swapped control to the girl. Doing this caused both of the AI characters to try to move to the girl in the one frame between when the healing was animated and whenever the healing numbers showed up. And this flung them all up the ramp, and now we're basically all the way through. We also did a little bit more whip pull based walking through walls because why not? Get used to it. You'll see a lot more later. And now we cast ice on the crystal orb twice in order to carry in the event of triggering the crystal orb to cover up the event that's supposed to lock you in the arena with the Minotaur. Therefore, we didn't even fight the Minotaur, and we basically did the Fire Palace 100% wrong.
yeah, everything goes wrong in a sense. So yeah, basically event carrying over from one room to the next one, or the game trying to execute that event, as in hitting that crystal switch a second time, is going to be another thing that we will be doing later again as well. Just overriding one event that's supposed to happen. In this case, there's supposed to be chandeliers or what are they thing called? The torches supposed to appear at the entrance and at the exit of the room that are supposed to lock you into the room with the Minotaur until you defeat him. But, well, carrying over that event just lets us run straight through, and funnily enough, the Minotaur doesn't even have a hitbox, so we can actually just run straight through him. Speaking of running straight through him, in this next area, we're supposed to go ahead and talk to an NPC called Mara, who gives us the key to the sewers, as in a password. But we're not going to do that because we can just very closely, go along the wall. In fact, it's pixel perfect to be exactly aligned with the wall at the top, and we kind of completely circumvent that event trigger where the guy is supposed to walk up to the sewers entrance and block you there. So just run past him. As I said, it's pixel perfect. If you don't set it up, it's a 50% chance whether you get it or not based on how the movement works in Secret of Mana. So it's kind of curious.
Yeah. Whenever you are dashing in this game, you move 3 pixels per frame. Whenever you're walking, you're moving 2. So depending on whether we want to be on a odd or even vertical position, we can dash or not after we check where we are at the end. So Yagamoth walked along the fence at one point to check where he was based on his shadow and where the pixels lined up there. That told him whether he needed to dash again to try to get through. If he failed, it was no big deal. He'd just do another select mash to walk through that guard, just like in Matango. This sewer system, by the way, is pretty stressful if you don't know exactly what you're doing. We take the blue drops very seriously. They will turn your characters into snowmen, which is a pretty significant time loss if they hit you. So we balloon the first set that would be in our way. And the second set, you just have to stay calm, keep moving down and right, and keep pressing the select button to move your entire party along the wall. If any of your party members are allowed to try to start combat, they will immediately move upward. As soon as they've done that, the blue drop splitting animation has this giant hitbox and you'll get hit.
Yeah. Weird thing to note, babe, by the way, that the boy and the lady have the exact same hitbox for themselves. However, the sprite actually has a slightly wider but not as tall hitbox. So in certain instances, we actually cannot do the same strategy depending on which character we have in the lead. And also, further extending to that, because both the boy is actually in a separate frame cycle, maybe we can explain that a little bit later, I guess. But the short version is that the timing for the characters does not work out the same between each other either. So it's actually very particular in a lot of rooms which character we have in the lead and which ones we want to not have in the lead particularly. For example, there's a room coming up where we can just hold up left or up right with the boy and the lady because their hitboxes is not going to run into one of these blue slimes. However, the sprite would actually have to walk around the slime a little bit further because otherwise he gets hit. It's actually kind of weird. And maybe just to illustrate this, I'm going to narrate how this next area is going to go down for, well, what the channel strategy is supposed to be. Also, let's actually see whether I get this. I didn't get it. That's okay.
You went for the balcony.
Yes. Alright, so here in this room, we just run past these guys. Then in the next room, I take my time in order to switch to the boy, because I usually want to wait in this room a little bit anyways for these guys to go out of my way. This room here, we do not want to run. The next one, we just go down right, dash straight down. Next room, we do the same thing exactly again. Also, I did not select the boy, so that could be an issue in 2 rooms from now. So, in this next room that we're going to go into, there it is. So, the boy doesn't get hit by this, but the lady sometimes does. In this room here, I actually want to move far up enough that I spawn both the blobs on the, or all 3 blobs on the screen, meaning they only do 1 splitting animation rather than 2, so I can get past them slightly further. In this room, I specifically want to beat the boy in order to hit that ghoul before he hits us, because only the boy can realistically hit him in time, which is a bit strange.
The girl is using the whip right now. Not only is the whip slower to attack with, it has a minimum attack range. If you're too close to an enemy, it just won't hit.
Yes, exactly. Also, I just selected the second controller just before stepping onto that switch and walked out of the room with the second controller. If I didn't do that, I would have actually gotten the boy hit by the blue slimes, guaranteed unless you cast a spell on them. So using two controllers there is very handy. This next room here, after hitting the switch downstairs, I want to be with the lady in order to dash straight to the left at the top wall. If I were to do the same movement with the boy, both the sprite and the lady get hit by that red bat right there. In this next room, we dashed very close to the wall here, and just to make it safer, I wait until this weird I Spy thing spawns another enemy, meaning that there's only going to be one more enemy in the rest of the room, which means we only have to avoid one rather than two. And these little imp things are really, really annoying to deal with.
Not
Then
only do
afterwards-
they have two projectiles, they also cast magic. Magic will lock you in place for quite some time, and it's kind of a big time loss.
Yeah, indeed. Plus, in case your characters are too low HP, you may want to heal them too, which takes even more time. Alrighty, so we get to the next wall. This wall here is a bit different than the other one, but it's kind of the same concept, which we haven't quite explained that last time. You do not want to kill both eyes. In the first wall, killing both eyes is effectively just a bit of a time loss. It's kind of slow. But this one here is actually straight up dangerous if you accidentally kill both the eyes, because it will go into a very special secondary phase if you do that. And that special secondary phase will mean that... Oh, good thing I didn't walk out of bounds.
I was a little worried there. It's like, you really want to go there?
Yeah,
You,
sometimes
you can't use the magic rope here, so if you did get yourself stuck, that'd be bad. Oh, it was forming on the girl anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, it was okay. I was a little bit worried there for a second. Oh, by the way, real quick, interrupting myself, this is one of the reasons why I actually prefer running on the SNES Mini rather than original console. So these cutscenes here have rather extreme flashing on the original Super Nintendo version. They toned that down very, very drastically. Like, this is not nearly as bad. Like, it's literally a seizure warning if you play on the original console for these particular scenes. Whenever the screen just relatively softly flashes light like this, it's really, really extreme on the original one. And it's also probably the biggest reason that if I ever run this on more marathon runs, I will probably choose the SNES Mini version. Unless we want to play this with 3 players, because, well, there's only the original Super Nintendo version where we can play this up to 3 players. That's not true. The Virtual Console would also work, I suppose. Alrighty, and we get to the vampire. I have a very particular plan for the vampire, but it's kind of like a 50-50 with the vampire plays along. Plus, afterwards it's relatively tight execution if he does. So let's see. So first of all, I want the vampire to just jump straight down at me. And he did. Well, with that idea. Oh, I might get knocked here. I'm going to move slightly left with the sprite, so the vampire hopefully he doesn't. He would jump to the left if he continues jumping, but unfortunately he didn't, so... Vampire.
Yeah, we call this guy Trollpire for a reason.
You know, this could actually work. I guess I'm just gonna do this with lady, I suppose. It's not quite what you normally do.
Oh, wow, switching to analyzer strats here.
Yep.
Okay, worked out. Nice.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well there. You only need to hit him 3 times, with high damage rolls to be specific, in order to kill him. And so I specifically used Analyzer as a spell there in order to lock Vampire into place. So the idea of the spell is not to deal damage, the idea is just to lock him into an animation where he cannot do anything. I specifically placed the lady with the second controller in front of him in order to have him grab her and start eating. Kind of like the spiky tiger earlier eating the sprite, it just allows us to keep him in place for longer in order to deal more damage and attack him multiple times again and again. And especially for a later version of this similar vampire boss, we really want him to play along just from the very beginning, otherwise the fight can get rather ugly. Oh well. By the way, we're coming up to a skip that was discovered by Crow, which in hindsight, I'm wondering how we didn't figure that out any earlier. But at some point, Crow had the idea of, actually, would you like to explain it?
Yeah, let's go for it. So, we want to skip as many bosses as we can, and we're going to skip Metal Mantis here. You're supposed to meet with the Emperor and then get locked into an arena and all that stuff. However, a character whose weapons are not out can walk through NPCs. We've been using this pretty regularly in towns in order to like select mash through something, and we kind of wanted to do this in the Emperor's Castle. Unfortunately, because the Emperor's Castle will soon become a dungeon, your weapons are out while you are there. However, a dead character never has his weapons out. So we take advantage of the enemies while they are still there. Once we go through this cutscene here with the resistance, the enemies disappear. So that's why I took a little detour to get someone killed. Then we will do some shenanigans to confuse the AI enough about its pathing to get that AI character to move past where the guards that are blocking our path are. And then once they are past, we revive them, take control of them, and go through the entrance. And with that, we are through to the rest of the dungeon. And because it still thinks we're trying to go to the Emperor, all the enemies are gone. So we have a clear shot to just waltz on through to the ending of the place where we will fight the second of the bosses here. And at that point, we'll be able to go to the rest of the game.
Indeed. So one of the weird things was that at some point we were skipping so many enemies. Usually the sprite would actually level up the sword to level 1 at some point during the run. But because, well, we started skipping more and more bosses, the sprite got less and less weapon experience, so we had to actually kill some minor enemies previously for the sprite to still get enough weapon experience to have a little bit of a time gain. Which is not even that relevant, but yeah. I actually really like that skip because it's just like, why didn't I think of this before? It's kind of silly. Also here we have Mech Rider number 2, and I just kind of messed this up, but at the same time I got lucky and it still works.
Yeah, that wasn't so bad. If he went left, that would be bad. What the Mech Rider enemies do, and we will fight a third of these guys, but they try to move up and down until they're on the same level as you, and then they dash across. So the usual method there is to always stay either above or below them, so that they never do that dash, because once they do, you have to chase them down. In the meantime, they might start launching missiles. It gets annoying. Here, a dash did occur, but thankfully it happened up and right, so he didn't have to go chase him down.
Indeed. Also, we are coming up to the point where we can finally more or less freely move around the world, and this is kind of where I came into, well, first figuring out certain things for the speedrunning and eventually speedrunning it myself, because I was just really curious about certain glitches and what works and what doesn't work, how they work, etc. That I was just poking around and trying things. And one of my first, contributions was figuring out that, hey, with 2 controllers, we as a matter of fact can actually skip pretty much the entirety of the mid-game here that we're supposed to play. And the way we do this is by just going up the mountain, kind of like you're normally supposed to by the story in order to know where to go and give the directions. However, unlike we are supposed to, we're actually just going to go straight into the trials that is going to take place over here. So we are skipping the entirety of the Palace of Darkness, we are skipping the entirety of the Gold Tower, Tasnica, and there was one more thing that we're skipping.
A Moon Palace.
Exactly, the Moon Palace. But by just doing a little hop right here with a level 1 charge attack with the sprite, we can go straight through the wall after talking to the NPC right there, and just ignore all of that. Now that comes actually with a bit of a problem later, because there is going to be the Grand Palace, where it's supposed to show all the things that you have gained at that point, meaning all the summoning spirits, if they're various elements, is normally required in order to pass through that palace. So we were a bit stumped, so we could go in here early, but it was not useful because, well, we couldn't exactly skip the Grand Palace and still had to go and grab the spirits. We were able to skip Tasnica, so I guess that was neat. And also, eventually, we were able to skip the Moon Palace because you don't really need it for that round. As in Luna, you don't really need. However, we were kind of stuck. And at some point, I randomly figured out the concept of the backwards Grand Palace. And that is going to be a thing that we will see very soon. Also, here's a fun thing, where casually, you probably actually don't even know that you in fact can solve this entire area here by letting your cactus die, because normally you probably have too much armor for these enemies to deal particularly much damage to you or any damage at all. The concept is that if one of your characters dies, the equivalent enemy doppelganger also disappears. So for a speedrun, we just let ourselves get hit a bunch and, well, the doppelgangers disappear, we revive somebody, and we just keep going. And let's put it this way, this wasn't even the craziest part. Now we're getting to a point where I think it was Yukro, right, who came up with the concept of the Ice Palace.
Yeah, it happened in the same brainstorming session that got us the Metal Mantis skip. I just stopped playing the game for a while whenever I came back. That's the best time to come up with new ideas. So because we never cleared the Ice Palace, if we visit there, the game will set a flag that says, if you die, instead of actually dying, revive the boy and kick the boy out of the Ice Palace. This is Santa not being a complete and utter monster, I guess, is kind of the idea there. But because we never dealt with the Ice Gigas at all, that flag is still active. So we stopped there. We took off with Flammy in order to prevent the game from undoing the flag as it normally would when you exit the area to the south. And now we are going to intentionally lose this battle against... his name is AGDQ, but we call him Watermelon for obvious reasons. Once we lose here, we will cause the game to be in a strange state where some of the events that were supposed to happen here happened and some of them didn't. Looks like you're getting chain bursted, which is unfortunate because he's kind of keeping your body alive for longer than it should. But eventually, Santa just tells us, scram! And then we're back alive. Now that we have put the game in a strange state, we have Sheeks, who's the guy who turned into AGDQ. He's just kind of chilling in the Mana Palace right now. We are now going to go to the Frosty Forest Neko location. You're going to save here. If you remember way back at the beginning of the run, I said that whenever you save the game, it remembers not where you are when you save, but where you were when you entered the room. That information is not properly saved whenever you land in a room with Flammy. So we land with Flammy, immediately save, and the save file we just created does not know where we are. Normally, if you load that save file, the game will crash. However, if you hold LR select start for a long enough period of time, and then after having played the game in some other file, and then you try to load the file with the incorrect location data, the game will place you in wherever you entered the most recent room in the game you were playing just before, which is why we are now restarting the game, because there is one particular room here, specifically the one with the waterfall bridge, where if you enter there at any time other than during the normal expected cutscene, the game will instead do an action where it boots you to Potos Village after having turned all of your characters invisible. Invisible characters is kind of the game's flag that you are in cutscene mode. As long as you are in cutscene mode and the event system is active, the game will allow any character to walk through walls, which means that by talking with Sheiks, who we just placed into the Mana Palace by losing to Watermelon without causing a game over, by using Santa's wish of a extra life, we can just turn a character left to interact with sheiks from wherever, and this will allow us to walk through walls and just go any place in this room that we like. We will then turn one of the characters visible, and we will use these two characters in order to get through this room. We can just stab a pole. This will also activate the cutscene system, and since we still have one invisible character, the sprite, we will be able to continue walking through walls. We press that trigger twice, which is enough to convince the game that we have completed the palace. We again walk through walls to get to where we fight Hexus, and magically Hexus is here. We can progress through the game. We did not have to go through the Sunken Continent. We did not have to do the subway system. We did not have to do the majority of the Grand Palace. We did not have to acquire Lumina to cast the spell on the Crystal Orb. We did not have to go through the Dark Palace in order to get Shade to deal with another Crystal Orb. We have skipped so much of the game.
Indeed. A bit of a weird side effect here is actually that because we skipped a bunch of stuff, and we also skipped finding the snap dragon, which is actually a very recent step that I accidentally came up with. Oh, that's not good.
Uh-oh. That's Blue Hexus.
That's not good. Yeah,
Hexus has a very strange AI script where she will change which element of attacks she's using based on where your party is on the screen in relation to her. And I believe Yagamoth moved too far left to cause the transition to the blue form. Worked out anyway, but we greatly prefer the default pink form because it will only use Dispel Magic or Pigmus Glare, one of which does no damage, and the other of which is physical damage easily negated with a barrel. So that's the usual way to deal with the fight. It got a little more complicated, but it was fine.
Yeah. One of the weird quirks, because we now also skipped Snapdragon, is that we have to actually cast a spell on Hexus first. Otherwise, she's just completely bugged out and will not allow us to actually hit her with physical attacks. It's kind of weird as to why that happens. I don't quite understand it. But basically, casting a spell on her will fix it, so that's one of the positives. Also, I got the wrong charge attack, but I'll just roll with it. So here, normally you want to have a charge attack that just deals straight up swing damage rather than like fancy moves that look good but cost a bunch of time to execute.
Should we talk about the music here?
Oh yeah, that's gone.
So, Yagamoth once again that corrupted save file in order to the term we use is save warp. We just jumped straight into the file here. So as far as the game is concerned, the current file we're playing on didn't even do all those shenanigans in the Grand Palace just now. This file came straight from the Frosty Forest Neko and jumped into this map here. Reason being, we wanted to skip the cutscene that talks about Mech Rider 3, how he's like an undead thing created by Thanatos or whatever. Side effect of that is no music. Makes the fight even creepier.
Yeah. By the way, fun fact, yes, technically we are in the final dungeon. This is supposed to be the Mana Fortress, but we're not quite there yet. Because what we are supposed to do now is we go into the Pure Lands and power up our Mana Sword all the way and fight a bunch of bosses. It's actually one of my favorite areas. Unfortunately, well, we can just kind of ignore that. It's also one of the things that I came into and we just decided, hey, we can just go alongside the tool-assisted speedrun and completely ignore everything else. Also, I probably should save before I go there. So, there is that weird thing that is supposed to lift you onto the ledge whenever you interact with it. It's a weird little yellow, I think they are called high stepper.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, either way, these little yellow things, they give us the opportunity to just jump onto the ledge and get a little shortcut. So what we are going to do is we're actually going to use a level 1 charge attack with the sword, which is a forward lunge with the sword, as you might be able to have seen before, or you may already know. And what we do with that is we can then unleash that sword attack with the sprite, then call the Flammy with the second controller in order to have the sprite move into that little yellow thing while we are calling Flammy. And what this does is that the game wants to execute that jumping event that we jump onto that little ledge there. However, because it gets interrupted by calling Flammy and we fly around, and then we land on the Mana Fortress, it's just going to execute that event at the earliest possible moment, as soon as we arrive on the Mana Fortress. Also, worth noting that we have effectively no equipment here, and most of the enemies are going to one-shot us, so this is going to be pretty tricky, and I hope I can pull this one off, so that's going to be fun. Okay.
So we're about to do some more severe walking through walls. The basic way that walking through walls is we start a cutscene that allows you to walk through walls, and then we do something. In this case, we're using items in order to kind of get the game stuck on that state and let us just keep gliding through walls. So we got the boy through, we got the girl through, but now we have to get the sprite through, and this is a little trick here because we have to hit the whip pull with someone other than the sprite. If the sprite hits it, he can't move. So we do the overcharge stuff in order to swap to the boomerang and get a very long-range boomerang attack. Looks like we missed on the first try there, so we'll have to do it again. But we'll get a overcharged, slightly boomerang attack that goes a long enough distance that it will hit the whip pole there and thereby enable us to get the sprite through in kind of the same way. There we go. And now everyone's through the wall, and that's... If you get it right the first time through, it saves like maybe 15-ish seconds. If you have to set it up again like that, it probably breaks even or so compared to going through the Mana Fortress normally.
Yeah, it's not particularly much of a time save, but honestly the big deal about it is that we avoid a lot of enemy encounters. Once again, they will pretty much one-shot any of my character, except maybe the boy who survives maybe one attack once in a while. So not having to deal with them is actually a huge benefit of just that skip through the wall. So next up we get to Buffy, and that happened immediately. Oh, maybe? Hang on.
Yeah, Buffy is like Vampire, except way more HP and slightly more annoying. In particular, the bat attack that he has is a pretty different style of attack. It's not a spell. It doesn't really have any lead-in time. It just immediately hits the target for damage. We will be using a lot of royal jams here on out, because all of the attacks that come our way will send us to the ground dying. And it turns out that whereas a candy or a chocolate will not revive someone who's at 0 HP, if you use a royal jam early enough on a 0 HP character, it will bring them back. Cure water also works the same way. At this point, we have the lockdown on the Buffy, and we should be able to kill him pretty quickly at this point. So we've gotten Buffy trying to eat the sprite, but we're using this speed down spell, which does not do damage. It just kind of does an animation, and we can attack in the short periods of time in between those animations to stack one more instance of 900-ish damage if we get the dodge roll right. And so we have gotten through what is probably the hardest fight of the game.
Yeah, especially management-wise, because you can see if we don't get the initial good pattern, we just have to adapt on the fly. There's a lot of micromanagement, making sure that my character stands below him and I can immediately cast a spell or immediately attack him at the earliest possible opportunity. It basically goes a lot into trying to manipulate everything to our advantage. Speaking of manipulation, without spawn manipulation, the Mana Fortress, we actually originally used to buy the better armor and equipment, until I decided, you know what, let's just figure out how to manipulate the spawns properly. and we saved a lot of time just not getting the latest parts of equipment. But also the downside is that we get one-shot by virtually every spell. So we kind of have to deny all the damage that the enemies and bosses throw at us. Also, at this point, we are about high enough level that... Oh, that's not... We are about high enough... That should work. Whatever, we'll just roll with it.
Okay.
We're about high enough level that's about only a 30% chance to miss. So slightly better because we have more agility.
Yeah, so this is Dread Slime. We were supposed to fight Lime Slime, who got smaller as we attacked him. We didn't. However, Dread Slime does the reverse. Every time you hit him, he becomes larger. You are not allowed to move towards the center if you are in the slime. If you mismanage the positions of your characters, this can become a problem. However, what Yagamoth has done here is he has placed his other two characters, other than his damage dealer, into opposite corners. Whereas most bosses will always target whoever is closest to them, Dread Slime will target whoever is furthest away, and he will keep trying to move towards that. So, if you put the boy in the middle and the other two characters in the corner, the Dread Slime will basically just stay right around where the boy is, and all of his spells will target the other two characters. You swap control to whoever isn't getting hit by an acid storm, and use that character in order to protect the one who is. Meanwhile, the boy gets to do his attacks unfettered. Winds up working out really well.
Alright.
The glitchless strategy for that fight actually gets really complicated. AIs, and that's kind of the point in the game where you start transitioning to using physical damage, where most of glitchless is just cast magic on enemies, question mark, profit. I see we're going with one character now.
I'm just gonna revive them. Normally,
Okay.
I would just keep going with one character, but that's a bit risky. As
Yeah,
you could see.
in other parts of the game, if things had gone wrong, we could have from the Frosty Forest Neko, just save dwarf right back in. And you're seeing right now what happens. Anything goes wrong. Once you've gone off of the spawn manipulation, it's kind of like going off of step route if you're thinking of like Final Fantasy IV or other traditional RPGs, where you no longer have control over which enemies are going to appear. You just have to deal with which ones show up. And as you can see, most of them will hit, and most of them will kill the characters in one shot. My preference, if anything does go wrong in this sort of area, is to just go into Metal Gear Mana mode and just put barrels on everyone and just mosey along through at the incredibly slow pace that the barrels allow you to walk at.
Yeah.
It'll get you through. It's just kind of the walk of shame there.
Indeed. Also, enemies can basically not see a character that is in a barrel. It literally is Metal Gear Solid. It's kind of funny. Alrighty, we are through. We have 2 Cups of Wishes, so I might just go ahead and multiply them if I get an opportunity.
I
Just
would
to
recommend it.
Yeah, we have enough resources to normally finish the game, but the Dark Lich is the next boss here, and the second to last boss for that matter. So he can be quite mean, but usually he is not as bad as Buffy. But basically, the best 2 patterns are if he ever just stays there and keeps casting spells. He always alternates between casting a physical spell and then a magical spell if he is above ground. However, if he could also immediately dive down below ground, that would actually also be kind of convenient, because then we can abuse certain AI quirks in order to lock him into a very, very quick AI loop. We used to call it the headbang glitch, but it's more of an AI loop rather than actually a glitch. So there's that. But let's see what we are going to get here.
I would say if he disappears at that point, go ahead and do the Cup of Wishes nonsense, because if the headbang goes wrong, you don't actually get the opportunity to use Royal Jams in that scenario.
Yeah, because of the instant deaths. Alright, let's see. Also here, we're actually equipping the sword on the boy because we want to have it equipped on him after this fight. Let's see. Yeah, I did that. I did the derp. I accidentally charged up too far with the boy here. Trying to correct the charge attack is a bit tricky. I might have gotten it. Let's see.
That looks good to me.
Yeah. But trying to get charge attacks in between as a backup is not just like unusual, as in it's not as well practiced. It's also sometimes actually a much tighter frame window. Most of the things you have 4 or 5 frames to like operate and react to in this game. However, in certain weird circumstances, you only have like 1 or 2 frames. I guess I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I think you were a little early on the Roy.
Yeah, that's
You got the actual animation from it.
Just double checking. Okay, the chocolates are awesome too, so I need to trash 2 items.
Alright, so we're going to repeat a glitch from earlier in the... for anyone who wasn't here at the time, you're going to throw away a piece of equipment that the boy has equipped. The game will try to unequip that item after it's already been deleted. It does this based on the horizontal position of the trash can on the screen, which is based on where the boy is. So he's using the portraits on the bottom of the screen in order to line that up. And then he will throw away an item. The game will search for what it thinks the boy has equipped, but we've directed it to the RAM that is actually your current consumable items inventory. So he's done this in order to reduce his number of a couple of items from 2 to 0. 0 acts as if it were 8. So now he has more cups of wishes to work with.
Indeed. Alrighty, so we managed to defeat him. I also opened up a full screen menu here to skip some of the level up texts. And that's kind of all there is to it. I don't have to change the border around the text, but it just happens to be that menu, so sometimes I try to do it just as I go. There's no particular reason to change the menu border. Just the full screen menu skips all those level up texts. This was the second to last boss, and if you think that might have been the end of all new glitches, well, not quite. There's actually going to be 2 more. And a lot of the time there's kind of the misconception that because we don't have Dryad magic, well, we cannot defeat the Mana Beast. But 2 things. For one, we actually get Dryad magic here, even though we'd never actually picked up Dryad as a spell, just because the game unlocks effectively the Mana spell right here, so we just get Dryad magic. So we cast the Mana Source spell right here, before we even go through the teleport. This will unlock the Mana Sword, and also simultaneously skip a little cutscene that normally happens before it. So that's one part. The other part is, because we never leveled Dryad, the Mana Sword's duration is going to be super, well, low. Like, it's going to only last about 10 seconds or so, if we are lucky. In order to extend the Mana Sword's duration, we just cast an elemental spell on it. In this case, it's going to be Ice Saber to cast onto the sword. And with this, we will basically just have a real Mana Sword that is just straight up as strong as it gets. And the funny thing is, we don't even use the Mana Sword for the damage output. The only reason why we use the Mana Sword is because it actually has significantly, well, it just never misses. That's what I'm getting at. The Mana Sword never misses, so instead of having a 30% chance to miss with the spear, we always hit with the sword. We could deal the exact same amount of damage with the spear as we deal with the sword, because the quirk is effectively that the Mana Beast is not vulnerable to the Mana Sword. It's just that the Mana Sword normally has such a ridiculously high attack power, thanks to, among other things, gaining a boost through the Mana Sword spell, and basically making each of your slashes in a casual playthrough just deal 999 damage baseline, minus the 450 defense of the Mana Beast, which is the main reason as to why you don't usually deal as much damage to the Mana Beast with other weapons, if you deal any damage at all, because all your attacks are just minus 450, so unless you deal at least 451 damage, you will deal 0 damage to the Mana Beast. So here, I could use a spear, but because of the improved hit chance of the weapon here, I just use the sword instead. Also, trying for 1 cycle here.
Yeah, we prefer the Mana Beast to come from below. He can that's just purely random, and below allows us to start hitting him slightly earlier. We will do one instance of Acid Storm. That spell reduces the target's defense by a quarter, which, considering how high the Mana Beast's defense is, this is a pretty substantial increase to the damage that we get to deal. After that, we're going to lock him in place for as long as we can with Slow Down. At some point, Yagamoth will probably stop with the slowdowns, because once the Mana Beast is locked in place, it will immediately cast Wall on itself, and we don't want to cast Slow Down on ourselves. Wall just reflects whatever magic is cast on the target. So at this point, we're going to switch to just swinging, and any critical hits we get will do 9999 damage. Thanks to Acid Storm, we get to do 600 some damage with our normal attacks. And with all this together, provided we don't get too unlucky with Lucid Beam casts, we should defeat the Mana Beast quickly, which will bring us to time fairly soon. We cut time whenever the screen fades. Wait, no. It's whenever the party gathers, right?
Yeah,
I was thinking of the new game.
Time. There we go. Alrighty, and that was Seeker of Mana, 1 player, 2 controller. Once again, this is actually more or less one of the main categories, not just a gimmick. It's a lot of fun, and if you just thought this is interesting, and you may have an SNES Mini, just give it a shot, because why not? And also, here I say, thank you so much for the opportunity to let me run this at Classic Games Done Quick Redone, because Seeker of Mana is part of the reason why I got into speedrunning in the first place, especially at the GDQ events. And now here I am, just kind of 10 years later after the first GDQ event, just being able to run this. And also, very special thanks to you, Crow, for helping out with the commentary. It is very, very relieving being able to just focus on the game and not having to worry about certain aspects to explain them, rather just being able to, well, play instead. So thank you very much.
Yeah, this game means a lot to me too. It is the first game that I was speedrunning seriously, and yeah, it's still a game I know way too much about, technical details about, and it is a lot of fun to get to focus on just sharing all of that weirdness that goes on there. If you guys do want to see even more Secret of Mana action, I do the 1 controller speedrun category for this game, and after a long hiatus, I'm actually going to start it up again, because my submission was accepted for a local speedrunning event called Buckeye Speed Bash. So look for that in March, and you will see my run both practice up to that point on my channel for 1 controller, which has to use a very different set of glitches in order to achieve a lot of the same effects as what you've just seen here, because I don't have a second player to work with. So that'll be a lot of fun. I hope to see some of you guys there, and I'm also, of course, looking forward to the soon to arrive AGDQ as well. But for now, we've got more Classic Games Done Quick Redone coming our way, and all of this is great speedrunning action.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having us. The outro is probably a bit too long for this, so if you'd like to know what the moon phase is, I can tell in chat later. But once again, thank you so much for having us, and I wish you all a pleasant day, morning, afternoon, whatever it might be for you, and hopefully until next time.
Thank you so much, Yagamoth and Crow, for that fantastic run and great commentary. We're going to take it over to a break so we can get ready for our next run. This is the end of me for today. I'll be passing off to a good friend of mine, and I hope that y'all have a wonderful night. But stay tuned. There's more CGDQ coming up.